For years, his mother called me lazy, mocked my parenting, my cooking, and he said nothing. Then one night over dinner, he finally told her off, but instead of relief, I felt nothing. That's when I realized I might have already left him, emotionally. The knife scraped against the roast chicken, too loud against the plate. Irene always used serrated knives even when she didn't need to, like she wanted the cutting to sound intentional. She chewed slowly, then set her fork down with a clink, looked at me across the table, smiled. "You never season anything properly, do you?" Grant chuckled, not even looking up. Maya kept eating. I smiled the way I always did, small, polite, forgettable. I didn't say a word, because it was easier now. Not because I was patient. Not because I didn't care, because I'd already left a little. Emotionally, at least. It wasn't the insult. I'd heard worse. Irene was consistent that way. Passive-aggressive, then outright rude, then self-pitying when no one applauded her honesty. I used to argue back, not loudly. Just enough to show I was awake inside my own life. Enough to let her know I wasn't spineless. Now, I didn't see the point. Grant reached for the salt and passed it to me with a grin, like we were in on some inside joke. I took it. Used none of it. Maya asked for more water. I stood to get it. Irene cleared her throat like she might follow up her insult with another note. She didn't. The silence stretched. Familiar. Ugly. I returned with Maya's cup. She smiled at me and said thank you like she meant it. It was the only soft thing that landed. Dinner continued. Talk about traffic. About the neighbor's new dog. Irene's upcoming dentist appointment. All of it louder than the thing no one acknowledged. That she had insulted me again, and Grant had laughed again, and I had absorbed it again. And this time, it didn't hurt. That was the part that got me. It didn't sting. It didn't settle. It didn't burrow. It just happened. And I let it pass through like background noise. That used to scare me going numb. Now, it felt like the only way to survive a dinner I never signed up for but kept attending. Afterward, Grant asked if I wanted help with the dishes. He always asked. Always after she'd left, always too late. I said, "No, I've got it." And he kissed the top of my head, satisfied with his effort. Like proximity was love. Like being in the room counted for something. I rinsed a plate and thought, this isn't patience anymore. It's detachment. He didn't notice the difference. She called me lazy 3 weeks after Maya was born. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Grant had gone back to work the day before, and I hadn't slept longer than 90 minutes at a time since. Maya had been colicky, or overtired, or maybe just adjusting to the world like the rest of us. I was sitting on the couch with spit up on my shirt, a cold cup of coffee next to me, and Maya finally asleep in my arms. Irene walked in without knocking. She did that. Keys she insisted on having in case of emergencies. This wasn't one. She looked at me, really looked, and said, "Still in pajamas at noon? Must be nice." I said nothing. She moved through the living room like it was hers. Picked up a pillow from the floor, fluffed it, sat down. Her tone light but surgical. When I had Grant, I was back on my feet in 3 days. Cooked dinner for his father the night we got home. I don't remember what I said in response. I only remember the look on her face, the smile that said she'd drawn blood. Grant got home an hour later. I told him what she said, exactly word for word. I wasn't angry yet, just stunned, still bleeding from the cut. He rubbed my back and said, "She didn't mean it like that. She's just old school." I asked if he could talk to her. He sighed, leaned back, and said, "It's not worth the fight." That's when I felt the second wound. Smaller, quieter, but deeper. Because she had insulted me, but he had excused it. And that was the beginning of the split I didn't yet have language for. Not an affair, not abuse, just a slow unraveling of safety. One person attacked, the other person watched. And I learned that the person sleeping next to you can be just as harmful in silence as someone shouting across the room. I started doing everything myself after that, not out of pride, not to prove her wrong, but because I knew no one was coming. Not even him. Nina knew before I did. Not about the end that came later, but about the shape of the life I was building without realizing it. The quiet erasure, the slow submission, the daily, deliberate swallowing of myself. She saw it. We were standing in her kitchen, Maya barely a year old, strapped to my chest in a carrier because she wouldn't sleep unless she was pressed against me. I was venting. Again. about Irene's latest jab, about how Grant had changed the subject when I brought it up, about how I felt like a housekeeper in a house I didn't decorate. Nina poured tea, said nothing for a while, then finally, "A man who won't check his mother won't protect his family." I laughed at the time, called it harsh, but I didn't argue, because part of me knew she was right, I just didn't want it to be true. Back then, I thought being chosen was enough. I thought if Grant married me, moved in with me, had a child with me, that meant I was safe. That I mattered more than his mother's opinions. That love would naturally come with protection. But love isn't a shield unless someone holds it up for you. Grant didn't. He never had, not once, not really. Nina knew. She watched the light leave my eyes in pieces. Watched my stories shift from funny complaints to heavy confessions. Watched me start to make excuses for a man who stood silently while someone chipped away at my confidence with every visit, every comment, every side glance. "You're starting to explain your pain like it needs permission," she said once. I didn't have a response for that, because when someone sees you that clearly, denial becomes exhausting. I stopped telling her the full truth after that, not because I wanted to lie, but because I knew she wouldn't let me lie to myself. Nina never yelled. She just looked at me like she was waiting for me to stop shrinking. And every time she did, I felt a little closer to the edge. The night of the baby monitor fight, I stopped pretending we were a team. Maya had been crying for over an hour. Not wailing, just that tired, restless whimper that doesn't stop. The kind that wraps around your nerves and pulls until you either melt or snap. Irene was staying with us to help. She'd taken the guest room. Grant and I were in our bedroom, lights off, both of us pretending to sleep while the monitor glowed between us. I sat up first. Instinct. Grant didn't move. I whispered, "She needs one of us." He rolled over. "Your mom said to give her 10 minutes. I blinked into the dark. "My mom didn't say anything. That was your mother." He didn't correct himself. "She's been crying for an hour, Grant." "She's fine." I got up anyway, walked down the hall, picked up our daughter, who immediately clung to me like she'd been holding her breath. I sat in the rocking chair and held her until her tiny body went still. Irene's door was closed. Grant didn't come in. At 3 a.m., I was still awake, not out of anger, out of clarity. Because that night, something shifted. It wasn't about parenting styles. It wasn't about whose mother had the better method. It was about who stayed awake, and who let me carry it all. I could have asked for help. Could have said, "Switch with me for an hour, I'm unraveling." But I didn't. Not because I wanted to be a martyr, because I already knew what the answer would be. Irene believed in tough love. She told me once that Maya would manipulate me if I kept picking her up. Grant echoed it, not loudly. Just enough to make me question what I knew. But Maya didn't need tough love. She needed her mother. And I needed someone who didn't frame my instincts as indulgence. That night, I stopped waiting for Grant to come down the hall. And I never looked back at the bed we shared. The house was Grant's idea. "It's practical," he said. "Close to work, close to my mom, good schools." He said it like a checklist, like logic should always win. Like a life built efficiently was the same thing as a life built with care. I walked through it twice before we signed the papers. Every room felt cold, even in spring. The floors echoed. The kitchen was small. The guest room, already nicknamed Mom's Room before I'd unpacked a single box, was bigger than Maya's nursery. I smiled through the inspection, nodded through the paperwork, told myself I could make it a home. I was good at making things work, but I never unpacked fully. The boxes with my books stayed sealed in the hall closet. A stack of framed photos leaned against the wall in the master bedroom for 2 years. The rug I picked out stayed rolled in the garage until it curled at the edges and became unsalvageable. He called it settling in slowly. I called it something else, resistance, because I knew even then that it wasn't mine, not the space, not the plan, not the story we were writing. It was a house where Irene dropped by without warning, where her mail occasionally got delivered because the zip code's so close. Where I learned to keep my voice down when I vented, because Grant said the walls were thin and we shouldn't give her reasons. The hallway always smelled faintly of her perfume, even when she wasn't there. Maya colored the walls with crayon once. Grant panicked and scrubbed it clean before Irene's next visit. I wanted to leave it there, a mark, a rebellion. proof that someone small had dared to exist fully inside that house. Instead, I watched it vanish with a wipe and a sigh. It never felt like home. It felt like a stage. And I was the understudy to a role I never wanted. The longer we lived there, the less space I took up. I started to speak softer, move quicker, cook meals that wouldn't offend, smile before she walked through the door. And every night I went to bed in a house I paid for but never settled into. Because it had been chosen around me, not with me, and I was starting to understand the difference. Maya's 4th birthday party was the kind of event people post about and pretend went smoothly. There were balloons, a banner, a homemade cake I stayed up past midnight decorating. Streamers hung at a slight tilt because I was doing it alone, and the step stool was missing a rubber foot. Irene arrived early. She brought a store-bought cake, triple-layered, pristine white icing with a fondant unicorn on top. It looked like it had been shipped directly from Pinterest's algorithm. She took one look at mine and said, "A for effort." I smiled. Of course I did. She took over before the first guest arrived, started moving decorations, rearranged the chairs, cut the crusts off sandwiches I'd already plated, called my frosting charming in the tone people use when they're being diplomatic about a disaster. Grant watched her from the doorway, drink in hand, nodding along to her critiques like she was offering wisdom instead of rewrites. At cake time, she picked hers, not mine. She picked up the polished unicorn monstrosity, handed Grant the knife, and said, "Let's do this one." He didn't even glance at me, just cut the first slice. I watched Maya's eyes flick between us. She didn't say anything, but she looked confused, like something didn't match. After the guests left, after the photos were taken and the trash was bagged and the leftover cake sat on the counter untouched, I asked Grant why. "Why what? Why hers?" He blinked. "Babe, it's just cake." It wasn't. It was every moment I swallowed. Every scene I let play out without protest. Every time I tried to give Maya something real and homemade and slightly imperfect and been told that wasn't enough. The cake was just the latest thing in a pile of things that said, "She's better. She knows more, you're temporary." And Grant? He didn't cut the cake. He cut me out of the moment without even realizing it. That's how it happened always. Quiet. Polite, surgical. By the end of the night, I was tired. Not physically, not emotionally. Just in that bone-deep way you get when you realize the person standing next to you still doesn't see what's being done in front of him. Maya asked for a piece of my cake the next morning, said it tasted more like a birthday. I saved that line like a receipt. I brought up therapy on a Tuesday. Maya was napping. Irene had just left after dropping off a few things, which meant 3 hours of commentary and 2 passive jabs I pretended not to hear. I was washing dishes. Grant was scrolling on his phone, legs stretched on the couch like nothing needed tending to. I said it as gently as I could. "I think we should talk to someone." He looked up confused. "Like who?" "A therapist, just to work on how we handle things. Communication, boundaries." He didn't even pause. "We're not broken," he said, already looking back at his screen. "You're just sensitive." That word, sensitive, it landed harder than any insult his mother had ever delivered. Because it wasn't just a dismissal, it was a diagnosis. A way to say, the problem isn't what's happening, it's how you feel about it. I stood at the sink, water running over my hands, and thought, this is it. This is the wall. He thought he was reassuring me, telling me we were fine, that we weren't like those couples, that everything I felt was just noise I hadn't learned to ignore. But what he didn't see, what he refused to see, was that I wasn't asking because I wanted drama. I was asking because I wanted to save something, and he acted like I'd insulted him. I didn't push, didn't bring it up again. Because once someone decides your pain is a personality trait, every request becomes a performance. After that, I stopped asking for better, not because I stopped needing it, but because I knew he'd already decided I was the problem for needing it all. Eventually, I stopped arguing, not because things got better, because I got quieter. At first, it was restraint, an effort to stay calm, to keep things constructive. I told myself I was de-escalating, being mature, choosing peace. But then it stopped being a choice. I just didn't have the energy. He'd say something that deserved a response, something clipped or defensive or dismissive, and I'd blink, absorb it, and say nothing. It wasn't grace, it was distance. He noticed. Eventually, "You've been really chill lately," he said once, as if it were a compliment. "At least you're not yelling anymore." I smiled, because if he thought my silence meant progress, that was on him. I wasn't withholding affection to punish him. I wasn't waiting for him to notice and fix it. I wasn't even hoping anymore. That's what he never understood. By the time a woman stops yelling, pleading, explaining, she's not surrendering. She's gone. I made dinner, I laughed when I was supposed to, I texted back, I showed up. But only just enough, just the edges. The rest of me had pulled inward like a tide. Some nights he'd reach for me in bed, I let him. Not out of love, out of convenience, out of muscle memory. He never noticed the difference. That's the thing about silence, it looks like peace if you don't look too closely. But underneath it was everything unsaid, every need unmet. Every insult absorbed and folded into my spine. We didn't fight anymore. And he called that maturity. I called it the death of trying. It was after another dinner I don't even remember the details of. Another round of Irene playing critic. Another silence from Grant. Maya fell asleep in the car on the way home, her head against the window. I carried her inside, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. Then I left. I didn't tell Grant where I was going. I didn't ask for permission. I just drove. Ended up at Nina's like I always did when I couldn't hold the weight anymore. She didn't ask questions. Just opened the door, pointed to the couch and said, "You staying the night?" I nodded. She handed me a blanket, then poured 2 glasses of wine. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Comfortable, familiar. Then she said, "You don't have to live like this, you know." I didn't say anything. "You think Maya's not watching?" she added, softer now. That part landed, because I had been watching, for years, watching my mother make herself smaller, watching her call it peace, watching her wait for things to change while nothing ever did. And now I was replaying it, with better furniture, better lighting, but the same script. Later, curled up under a throw blanket on Nina's couch, I slept. Deep, dreamless, for the first time in what felt like months. No tension in my jaw, no middle-of-the-night wake-ups. No hypervigilance listening for a baby's cry or a mother-in-law's voice or a partner's shifting mood. Just rest. Maya woke up beside me the next morning, rubbed her eyes, and whispered, "This couch is soft." I smiled. "Yeah, it is." We ate pancakes in our pajamas. Nina let Maya stir the batter. No one criticized the mess. No one corrected me. It was the first morning I felt safe. Not in my marriage, not in my house, in my body. And I wasn't sure I could give that feeling back. It started like every other dinner: roast, mashed potatoes. Irene bringing her own salad because mine was too damp last time. Maya sat next to me, fidgeting with her napkin. Grant poured wine. Irene asked if Maya was still doing that late talking thing and followed it with, "Must be all that babying." I didn't blink, didn't flinch, just helped Maya cut her chicken. Then Irene said it. "So what do you do all day, really? You're not working, you're not cooking, you're a glorified babysitter with good intentions." She said it while reaching for the salt, like it was a fact, like I wasn't sitting right there, like my daughter wasn't sitting right there. And something shifted. Not in me, in Grant. He put his fork down, not loudly, just set it on the plate like he was done pretending. Then he looked at his mother and said, "Enough." She raised her eyebrows, smirked, "Excuse me." He didn't look at me, just stared at her. "You don't talk to her like that. You've been doing it for years and I've let you. But it stops here." Irene blinked, confused. He kept going. Calm, cold. "You don't get to walk into our home and insult her in front of our daughter and expect a plate of food and a smile." I didn't move, didn't breathe. Because this was the moment I'd imagined 100 times, when he would finally choose me, finally draw a line. Irene stood, said something about how sensitive we'd all become, grabbed her purse. Maya looked up at me, eyes wide. "Is Grandma leaving?" I nodded, "She is." Grant didn't sit back down, he walked into the kitchen. Stood there like a man waiting for a reaction he didn't know how to receive. And I just sat there, looking at my plate, feeling nothing. No wave of relief, no warmth, no hope, just still. Because the thing I'd waited for had finally happened. And it didn't matter anymore. After she left, the house felt too quiet, not peaceful, not tense, just hollow. Like something had broken, but there was no mess to clean up. Grant stood by the sink, drying his hands, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. He looked over. Well, that happened. I nodded. She won't be coming back for a while, he said, like it was some great announcement. Like we'd reached a milestone. I offered a small smile, neutral, gracious. Like someone who understood the gesture even if it came years too late. He waited, I stood, cleared the plates. He followed me to the kitchen. I stood up for you, he said, like he wasn't sure I'd noticed. I turned, met his eyes. You did. Are you okay? I rinsed a dish. Sure. He frowned like he was trying to do math in his head and the numbers weren't adding up. I thought you'd be relieved, he said finally. I finally said something. I nodded again, I know. But here's what I didn't say. That I'd already mourned the version of him who would have done that 2 years ago. That I'd already stopped needing his protection the night I realized I'd never get it. That the woman he thought he was rescuing didn't live here anymore. He kissed my cheek before bed, whispered, I hope this means we're okay now. I smiled, good night, Grant, and I turned off the lamp. He fell asleep quickly. He always did after declaring victory. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the relief to come. It never did. The next morning, Grant made coffee. He rarely did that. I usually woke up first, started the pot, packed Maya's lunch, got breakfast moving before anyone else stirred. But today, he was already in the kitchen when I came out. Coffee's on, he said, like it was a peace offering. Like that's what things had come to, caffeine as contrition. I poured a cup, sat across from him at the table. He smiled, tentative. You sleep okay? I nodded. I was thinking maybe we could take Maya to the park later, just us. That sounds nice. He waited for something more, a look, a touch, a thaw. It didn't come. I meant what I said last night, he added. To my mom. I know, I said. I want you to know I see things now, how I should have stepped in earlier. That stuff adds up, I get it. I nodded slowly, thank you. That was it, no bitterness, no sarcasm, just thank you. He looked like he didn't know what to do with that. Like he was expecting tears, a hug, something cinematic. Some signal that we were now on the other side of something hard. But I wasn't on the other side. I was outside of it. Detached. He kept talking, something about moving forward, about how good things had been lately, about wanting to reset. But it all floated past me like background noise. I sipped my coffee, warm and a little too sweet. And in my head, I heard the words I wouldn't say. You're trying to fix something I've already emotionally left. He was proud of himself. Like he'd finally crossed a finish line I was still expected to celebrate. But I was already in the next room. The worst part was that he wasn't a monster. He was just late, and I was too far gone to meet him where he finally arrived. Maya was in the back seat, drawing on the foggy window with one finger. We were headed to the grocery store, just her and me. Grant had stayed home to rest, which meant he was probably on the couch half watching a documentary he'd forget to finish. The radio was low. Maya hummed something, maybe a tune from preschool. Then, without looking up, she said it. Grandma is kinda mean to you. My hands tightened slightly on the wheel. I glanced at her in the rearview. Why do you say that? She just is. Silence. She drew a little heart on the glass, watched it fade. Then added, you never say anything back, you just smile like this. She mimicked a tight-lipped grin, too accurate. Too young to be that perceptive. I didn't know what to say. She looked at me again. Are you scared of her? No, I said softly, not scared. But you don't like her. I didn't answer. Because how do you explain to a child that grown-ups aren't always brave when they need to be? That sometimes silence isn't kindness, it's survival. That sometimes you make yourself small because it's easier than being told you're too much. Maya turned back to her window. If someone was mean to me, I think you'd say something. I swallowed hard. I would, I said, I always would. She nodded, okay. And just like that, she moved on. Back to her window, back to her world. But I didn't. I kept driving, hands steady, breath shallow, her words looping in my mind like a quiet accusation. Because she was right. I had stayed silent too long, and even my daughter could see it. I didn't plan to look at apartments. It just happened. One night, after Maya went to bed and Grant had passed out on the couch, snoring softly with the TV still on, I opened my laptop. Clicked open a browser, typed without thinking. 2-bedroom apartment near Westmont Park. Just to see, the listings were clean, bright, minimal, white walls, hardwood floors, sunlight pouring through windows like it was trying to make a point. I bookmarked one, then another. Made a folder, named it Maybe. Not new place, not move out, just maybe. I knew what I was doing, but I also knew I wasn't ready to name it out loud. So I let the word maybe carry the weight of what I wasn't ready to admit. I scrolled through pictures, floor plans, neighborhood notes, washer and dryer in unit, pets allowed, walking distance to the park. One listing had a small balcony, just big enough for a chair and a plant and a cup of coffee. I imagined sitting out there in the morning with Maya curled in my lap, no judgment in the walls, no footsteps approaching from the guest room with thinly veiled contempt. No performance, just quiet. I copied that link too. By midnight, the folder had 9 listings. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the dishwasher, the distant, low murmur of the TV. Grant shifting in his sleep. I didn't feel guilty. I felt curious. What would it be like to live in a space that didn't shrink me? What would it be like to not have to explain why the silence in my marriage felt heavier than any fight? I wasn't making a plan yet, but I was no longer pretending I wouldn't. The phone rang at noon. I saw her name before the ringtone finished its first loop. Irene. I didn't answer. She called again 5 minutes later. Still didn't answer. Grant poked his head into the room. You gonna get that? I shook my head. Not today. He stepped further in, brows raised. She's probably calling to make things right. I looked at him, really looked. Calm voice, expectant posture. Like he was waiting for me to do the thing I always did, smooth it over, pick up, be gracious on behalf of the family dynamic. She said some awful things, he added, like that would help. I know, I said. So then, he gestured toward the phone like it was a test I hadn't studied for. I don't feel like performing today. He froze. What? That's what it is when I talk to her, I said. A performance, being polite, being small. Saying the right things so you don't have to feel uncomfortable. That's not fair, he said, isn't it? He looked down, didn't have an answer. I stood, picked up my mug, walked out of the room without explaining myself further. Not to punish. Not to provoke, but because I finally understood that not answering wasn't an act of defiance. It was a boundary. And for once, I wasn't dressing it up as anything else. I said it to the mirror. Not to be dramatic, not to test how it sounded. I said it because the words had been floating around inside me for so long, they needed somewhere to land. I haven't loved him in a long time. The words didn't echo, they didn't sting. They didn't come with tears or a sharp pang of guilt. They just sat there, like something obvious I'd been trying not to name. I was brushing my teeth. Maya was still asleep. Grant was out getting coffee. I looked at myself, hair tied up, hoodie stained, tired eyes, and thought, I'm still here. I'm still me, just quieter. I rinsed the sink, sat on the edge of the tub, let the silence hold me. There was no one to perform for in that moment. No one to convince. No audience waiting for a declaration. Just me, and the truth, I hadn't loved him in a long time. Not since the first time he dismissed my exhaustion. Not since he handed his mother the knife to cut the birthday cake I made. Not since I cried quietly in the nursery while he slept through our daughter's first fever. Love had left gradually. Like a slow leak in a room no one notices until the floor is warped and the drywall stained. It didn't leave in anger. It left in his silence. And mine. And now here I was, saying it out loud. Not because I needed to leave tomorrow, but because I knew I couldn't stay forever. I stood, opened the drawer, pulled out mascara, something small, normal, something to do with my hands. I didn't feel free. I didn't feel trapped. I just felt ready to stop lying to myself. The apartment was small. 2nd floor, no elevator. A chipped stair railing and a hallway that smelled faintly of old wood and someone else's dinner. But the light inside, it was perfect. Soft, diffused, unapologetically quiet. I stepped in behind the leasing agent, nodding as she listed features I didn't care about. Vinyl floors, new paint, one assigned parking spot. I wasn't here for the amenities. I was here to see if I could breathe, and I could. The kitchen was narrow but clean. There was a window over the sink. The kind you could crack open while you washed dishes, even in winter. The kind that made it easier to think. The second bedroom was barely a bedroom, just enough space for a twin bed, a bookshelf, a tiny desk. Maya would love it. She liked when things fit just right. She called them cozy corners. The living room had a wall that would hold exactly one couch, one lamp, and a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I took pictures of the bathroom tile, the closet shelves. The way the light fell across the floor at 3:47 p.m., I texted them to Nina. No caption. She'd understand. The leasing agent asked if I wanted an application. I told her I'd think about it. She smiled like she already knew I wasn't there just to browse. As I walked down the stairs, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy, not freedom, just space. The kind you don't even realize you've been missing until you feel it wrap around you. In the car, I looked at the photos again. Zoomed in, zoomed out. Pictured my coat on the hook. Maya's drawings on the fridge. A life without constant tension. Without needing to smile through someone else's bad behavior. Just a quiet place. Ours and mine. He found the folder on a Thursday. I was in the kitchen making pasta. Maya was coloring at the table. Grant was supposed to be ordering takeout, but instead, he sat down at my laptop. Just checking something, he said. It wasn't locked. I didn't hide anything. I hadn't felt the need to. 5 minutes later, he walked into the kitchen holding the laptop like it was proof of something. Maybe, he asked. I didn't turn around. He said it again, sharper. Are you leaving me? I stirred the sauce, let it bubble a few seconds before I answered. Emotionally, I already have. He didn't respond. Not right away. When I finally turned to face him, his expression was somewhere between disbelief and confusion. Like the signs had been there, but he hadn't studied for the test. Maya, he said, I'm not taking her from you, I said. I'm giving her a version of me that doesn't shrink. He sat down at the kitchen table. The same place where I'd told him about my first postpartum panic attack. Where he'd once asked if Irene could stay the weekend. Where we'd planned birthday parties and canceled date nights and filled in silence with logistics. Now it was silent again, but not empty, just real. He looked up at me. So that's it. No, I said, it's not anything yet, but it's going to be. He shook his head. Why didn't you say something? I laughed once, quiet, not bitter, just tired. I did. You just called it sensitivity. He didn't argue. He just looked down at his hands like maybe he'd find the missing pieces there. I didn't comfort him. I didn't owe him that anymore. The pasta boiled over slightly behind me, and I turned to fix it. Maya called from the other room that she wanted to show me her drawing. And I went. Because this was the first time in years I wasn't the one left waiting for someone else to come to the table. We sat on the floor of her room, crayons scattered around us. Maya had drawn a house. One big window, a tree next to it, 2 stick figures inside, one tall, one small, both smiling. She pointed to them. That's us. I nodded. It's beautiful. She tilted her head. Will we have a tree at the new place? I paused. What makes you think we're moving? You said we might, you and me. I exhaled slowly. I did say that. She went back to coloring. Will it be quieter there? That stopped me. Not will it be bigger. Not will Daddy come. Not will I miss my room. Will it be quieter? I didn't answer right away. Because what do you say to a child who has already felt the noise of tension long before she could name it? Yes, I said finally, it will be quieter. She nodded, good. She didn't ask why, she didn't ask when. She just accepted it, trusted me, and I realized this wasn't about her adapting. It was about me finally giving her something that felt calm. Something that wasn't shaped around what everyone else needed. We colored for a while in silence. At one point, she reached over and drew a heart above the little stick versions of us. Because we'll still be together, she said. I smiled. Always. And for the first time since I said the words out loud to the mirror, to myself, I believed them. I wasn't ruining something. I was rescuing someone. Both of us. The apartment was still half full of boxes. One lamp, one couch, Maya's favorite stuffed animals in a laundry basket. My coffee mug stacked unevenly on an open shelf. It wasn't picture perfect, but it was ours. The morning light came in softer here. Not filtered through heavy curtains I didn't pick. Just clean light, enough to wake up slowly. Maya was curled next to me on the pull-out couch, breathing even and steady. She hadn't asked for a nightlight in this place, said it already feels safe. I listened to her breathing for a while. then eased out from under the blanket and stood, stretching in the quiet. No footsteps in the hallway. No clinking dishes from a mother-in-law who never knocked. No partner rustling in the kitchen, waiting for applause for doing the bare minimum. Just stillness. I made coffee. 1 mug. Sat by the window, knees tucked to my chest, the smell of cardboard and fresh paint still lingering. I didn't check my phone, didn't scroll, didn't rehearse anything I might say if Grant asked for a do-over. There was nothing left to say. Leaving hadn't felt triumphant. It wasn't a grand exit. It was a quiet decision made over years, executed in small steps. And now here I was, not fixed, not radiant, but present and free. Maya padded into the room, hair wild, dragging a blanket behind her. She climbed into my lap like it was the most obvious place to be. "Morning," she said, still half asleep. "Morning," I whispered. She looked out the window. "It's really quiet here." I kissed her hair, I know. She didn't smile, she just nodded. Like that quiet was something she could feel in her chest too. We stayed like that, watching nothing in particular. Just two people no longer shrinking to stay polite. No performance, no tension, no waiting, just us, finally still. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.